Hello and welcome to News in Depth here on TVP World with me, Hashim Kumar. It's been 100 days since President Karol Nawrocki took office, and his tenure is already reshaping Poland's political scene. From refusing 46 judicial nominations to publicly challenging Prime Minister Donald Tusk, Nawrocki has positioned himself as a bold and assertive leader. While critics warn of growing constitutional tension, 53% of Poles rate his performance positively, suggesting strong early public support, even as his confrontational style tests the limits of Poland's presidency and its balance of power. Joining us now to unpack these first 100 days and what they reveal about Poland's shifting political order is Marcin Zaborowski. He's a Europe editor at TVP World. Marcin, great to have you back. Thank you for taking the time.
Hello, Hashim.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So, let's start with this 53% approval rating. Yes, he's belligerent. There's a bit of tension between him and the Prime Minister, but the people seem to like it. Is this a reflection of a trend to the right across Europe?
Well, yes and no. Clearly it is a reflection of certain shift to the right because he was elected, and let's make it clear that he wasn't the favorite in this election. He's a former historian with almost no experience in politics, and he was facing Rafał Trzaskowski, very popular mayor of Warsaw, who nearly won the election 5 years ago when he was running against Andrzej Duda. Now he ran again, and he's a former Europe minister, former digitalization minister, former member of European Parliament, and so on. A man with a wealth of experience. And then he stands against this historian who has not much of national recognition, and still it's the historian who wins the election. So that was a big surprise. And that suggests that yes, indeed, in Poland, everywhere across Europe, we see that the right-wing rhetoric, that the rhetoric which is demolishing certain taboos, which is more national, more anti-globalization, anti-immigration, is winning. And the win of Mr. Nawrocki is another testimony of that. By the way, Mr. Nawrocki styled himself as a Polish Trump, in a sense. So it's a Trumpist politician of Poland, one might say.
Right.
And in that respect, yes, we see a clear evidence of that.
But it must be said that his win, at the last elections was very, very slim. His approval is 53%, so there's not an enormous enormous majority of the people that approve of him. What is it? Because there are lots of things I want to talk to you about. But before we do, what is it about his style or what he says that is so appealing to people, even though he has no previous political background?
I think it is several things. One has already been mentioned, a certain shift rightwards, which, Poland is also a part of. So the entire Western world is divided between now the forces of mainstream and the forces which are challenging traditional politics, constitutional regime, as well as some kind of political consensus which existed there. So we see that in Poland too. Then on the top of that, it was a kind of election which we might compare with a midterm election in the United States, because we have the government which is from the opposing camp of Mr. Nawrocki. That government has been in power for 2 years. It has another 2 years to go, so kind of midterm. It's not a hugely popular government, like almost any executive which has been in power for 2 years. And then in the midst of that, you have the election, and people are basically saying that they don't like the government, that they are no longer, some of the voters of the government are no longer inspired to turn up to the to the polling stations, and that's a reflection of that. But I want to come back to what you just said, that 53% approval rating is not a massive one. And indeed, that's true, especially in the Polish context, in which presidential powers are quite limited. The president does not really do many unpopular things. His main powers is to obstruct and object to what the government says and wants to do, and to represent. And Mr. Nawrocki, one has to say, is quite representative. He seems likable. He's got a very likable first lady. That's a certain break
in the international context. You mean?
In any context. Right. I mean, in the sense that he projects certain optimism. He projects a positive spirit. Despite having this Trumpist agenda,
right? Okay,
and that's in a sense, I guess, is part of his appeal for now. Right. But then again, the longer he will go as a chief obstructionist, the less popular he's likely to become over time.
Yeah, possibly. Well, talking about obstructionists, we've got a couple of sound bites coming up, which I'd like to view and then get your take on, Marcin.
I can say with full responsibility that such an approach to the nomination process violates the Polish constitution. Two constitutional bodies, the National Council of the Judiciary and the President, must cooperate with each other. However, there is nothing in the system that the President could push through, because it is the President who has the sole and decisive voice in deciding who will become a judge in Poland. We have a system of two entities. The nomination process is conducted by the National Council of the Judiciary, in which the President has his representative with the right to vote.
First of all, it is unfortunate that the Minister of Justice Waldemar Żurek is unfamiliar with the Constitution, which clearly defines the President of Poland's powers regarding the appointment of judges. It is even more unfortunate that the Minister of Justice is also unaware of the 2012 ruling of the Constitutional Tribunal. I understand that through his legal maneuvering, Minister Żurek is trying to draw attention to the lack of justification. However, there does not have to be a formal justification. The justification is that all judges appointed by the President of Poland are judges in Poland. They are supposed to issue rulings and judgments, not turn courtrooms into parliamentary chambers. This is a constitutional matter and relates to the President's prerogatives. The Minister of Justice should respect the Polish Constitution and the rulings of the Constitutional Tribunal.
Right, so there we saw a statement by the Polish Justice Minister and a response by President Nawrocki. And it's currently the core issue when it comes to tension between the President and the government and also the obstructionism. Talk us through what's happening here.
Well, I prefer to kind of focus on the political context of that issue rather than to go into the technical details here, which I'm not sure that our audience will be hugely interested in. So the thing is that traditionally presidential powers are the powers where the president represents the country abroad, represents also domestically various celebrations and so on. And he has a say in some nominations, and occasionally he can also, when he chooses to, he may veto legislation that he feels that is not in national interest. The former presidents were using these veto powers to a limited degree. And President Nawrocki is using veto power as a norm. He almost vetoes half of the legislative proposals which are landing on his table. So that obviously makes the job of governing extremely difficult for the government. Now, he's also using the powers of confirming nominations to obstruct the work of the government. Let's just mention
nomination of judges. Let's be clear.
Well, let's just not only judges.
Okay.
Not only judges. So, for example, the ambassadors. So most of the Polish ambassadors, chief of heads of missions abroad, lack the confirmation of the president. So that means that includes the head of mission in the United States. That includes the head of mission in countries like Italy. A number of other very important posts. So Poland's strategic partners get a signal then that the country is divided and that the president is not accepting the nominations of the government. That obviously weakens Polish diplomacy. So that's on that level. Then he is going further, and he is now also obstructing the nomination of judges, which is almost unheard of. Almost no former presidents did that. Also, he says that he will obstruct the nomination of his 46 judges in the system, which is almost paralyzed at this point in time, without giving any explanation, any written explanation. And he says he doesn't need to give a written explanation because he's the president, and that is in his prerogatives. That's not what the Constitution seems to suggest. Then there is also security services, where he rejected a promotion of a middle level of security services. So almost anywhere the Constitution only hints the president can come and actually finish up the process with nominations, with legislation, with the functioning of the state. He's saying no. So he's effectively becoming Dr. No.
Understood. Okay. Well, there are two issues that came to mind while you were speaking, Marcin. The first is who's doing all these jobs right now? I mean, who's representing Poland in the US, for example? Who's sitting in all those judges' seats?
Well, Poland is represented in the United States by a head of mission that happens to be a very seasoned politician, the former defense minister Bogdan Klich. He's definitely a heavyweight, and he gets a very strong recognition around the Congress and in the State Department and so on. But yes, the United States, Poland's strategic ally, gets the signal that the country is divided, and that strategically definitely weakens us. And the same thing, happens in many other locations. Thankfully, to almost all of these contested locations, very experienced, seasoned people have been sent, which, despite this handicap, they managed to find a way to wave the flag, and represent the interests effectively. With judges, unfortunately, we have a certain duality of a judicial system, and we also have a system which is already paralyzed. So the courts are reaching verdicts too late. Very often convicted criminals are being released because the court is running out of the time to actually reach the verdict. And that's endangering the national security, really, at the level of the almost street security.
So these are real-world problems that are manifesting as a result. Now, what does this mean? I mean, what is the president's game plan in terms of the internal politics of Poland? What's he hoping to achieve?
Well, I think it increasingly looks like that the president is determined. His chief point, really, and his chief ambition is to bring down the government.
Is that possible?
Not formally. He does not have formally these powers. He cannot really do that. But he can make the job of the governing so difficult that obviously he will. It could paralyze a lot of work of the government, make it ineffective, make it look to the electorate that voted for this government that that they can. They went to the polling stations, they voted for this government, they expected a certain change, and this is not coming. So yes, it is definitely a factor which is weakening the current government. And at the same time, it looks like also increasingly that Mr. Nawrocki wants to acquire a position of the leader of the right. the leader of the right, because let's also explain perhaps to the viewers that Polish right is not united. Mr. Nawrocki was the candidate of Law and Justice, the conservative national party, but there is also a far-right Confederation party, and Mr. Nawrocki is bridging between the two.
So some kind of coalition, perhaps, for the next government.
He is acceptable both to the far right and to the right. Yeah?
Understood.
And there is an increasing problem between the Law and Justice and Confederation, with the leaders of these two parties not getting on with each other. Mr. Nawrocki is coming across there that, I can speak for both of you, and I can represent the conservative national spectrum of Polish politics.
Understood. Now, in the last minute or so that we have left, Marcin, very briefly, you touched on the optics, looking at Poland from the outside when it comes to America. What do you think the implications are for Poland's role in the EU? Is it going to undermine Poland's role in the EU if they come across as being divided politically?
Well, in other circumstances, that might have been the case, but then also let's look around. We look into the German political scene, we look into the French political scene, we go outside of the EU, we look into the UK, and we see that political spectrum is divided almost all over the Western world. So we are in this moment in which democracy is effectively challenged, but a certain consensus which existed there after the end of the Second World War is no longer taken to be forgiven, and that the forces which want to redefine that system are growing. And Poland is simply a part of this trend, and in that sense the trouble in which Poland is now with this divided politics, with a president which is obstructing the work of the current government, is not an unusual phenomena in the entire EU context. So the government still is relatively popular, and the government is still effective in delivering change in the country when you compare it with other countries in the European Union.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the concern is that at this time, politically for Europe, where the EU has to work in a united way against the challenges, for example, the war in Ukraine, a more unified approach might be difficult when each country within the group is fighting internally. Just very briefly, last few seconds, would you agree? Well,
in the ideal world, of course. In the ideal world, we should be standing together when faced with the Russian threat, with the threats from some extremist forces south of European border, and this is not quite happening because we are internally divided, and these, for example, Russian agents are very much happy and engaged in bringing the division within our societies.
And the hybrid warfare.
This serves them very well.
Indeed. Marcin, unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. A pleasure as always. Thank you so much for taking some time to join us. And that brings us to the end of this episode of News in Depth. Don't go away, though, lots more coming up. Goodbye.